Hello, everybody. My name is Nina. This is Nicholas. We are from the publisher NTZ. And around 1 year ago, we published the book The Illusion of Knowledge from Dr. Harold Catcher in the original version in English. And now, 1 year later, we are publishing the same book in three other languages in Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. Um, Nicholas, maybe you want to introduce a bit the
Yes,
book and the author?
yes. Harold Catcher is a great scientist. Maybe some of you already know him, but maybe some of you never heard about him. But he has a long career in science and biology. He was one of the main discoverers of breast cancer gene in 1994. And besides, he has a long career in the aging research. So, as Nina told you, 1 year ago, we published Harold's book, The Illusion of Knowledge. And the main focus of this book and the recent Harold's research is the rejuvenation technologies that can make really a revolution in our medicine and in how medicine works. So we prepared some questions to Harold.
And so, first of all, hi Harold, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
The first question we have for Harold. First of all, this is the first interview with Harold, with that will have subtitles in other languages that we know of at least. So this video will be subtitled in Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. So for people who don't know you, Harold, yet, so could you first, as you are a researcher from the rejuvenation field, could you please first like briefly explain what do you understand in your view what aging is and how aging could be reversed or stopped?
Yeah, the normal view of aging, which is totally understandable, is that things fall apart. You know, what you call entropy. That is, as any complex machine, such as a human body, uh, is constantly used, it wears, and eventually it wears out. I don't, well, okay. It's the real question is, why does it wear out in a particular time? Why does, for instance, a rat live 3 years and a squirrel live 25 years? Why does a human live 100+ years and a whale 200+ years? I mean, there are all these questions that there's no answer to, and the traditional answer was everything is a matter of chance, stochastic, random chance. You have enzymes that by some unknown mechanisms suddenly start disappearing when they're needed to repair damage, etc. For instance, it's been shown that the accumulation of DNA damage is the same in young children as it is in old people. The difference is the repair. The difference is the repair. And the repair requires enzymes, it requires energy, and those are two of the things that are lacking in aging. Enzymes start disappearing, particular enzymes, not in general, and energy starts disappearing too, the kind of energy you need to do the repair. So it seems a kind of a hopeless case if it were, in fact, a matter of
of entropy, a matter of pure physical law. But entropy does not apply to biological systems. A biological system is negentropic, if anything. It reverses entropy. The law of entropy only applies to closed systems. A closed system is one in which there's neither exit nor entry of mass or energy. Obviously, the human body is not a closed system. So then the question is, is death inevitable? If there's a possibility of continual repair, then why is there death? And in fact, in some animals, there is no death. Mostly simple animals like Hydra and Planaria, etc. But there's no intrinsic barrier to repair and growth. But nature has evolved aging. Aging is not a simple phenomenon. It's quite a complex phenomenon with a lot of branches that all interact to assure that you won't live past what nature has decided is the maximal time for you. And traditionally, that maximal time is decided by the rate of predation. So what's the point of having a mouse live 100 years if it's likely to be eaten in its first year? So the safer an animal is, the longer it lives. And nature's, I guess, very kind in that aspect. In Africa, there's a fish called a turquoise African or African turquoise killifish. It lives in little ponds that occur in the rainy season. And when the ponds dry up, it lays its eggs in the mud, it dies, and the next rainy season hatches the eggs. The lifespan of those killifish is almost exactly adjusted to the length of time a body of water will remain liquid in that part of Africa in which it occurs. So the space of from 4 months to over a year, all depending on where that killifish lives. So in ways, that's what I say, nature's kind. It allows the killifish to live an entire life while its source of life dries up. Well, okay, so that's something else entirely. What we discovered, and it wasn't us, it was originally a group, actually there were several groups that discovered it over years, and it's a thread that's been picked up and let go many, many times. It's part of mythological lore. It's part of actual horrible events. But the idea that young blood could somehow youthen a person, give that person back his youth, is an idea as old as Dracula, at least, the idea of vampires.
Harold.
At this point, our patent is out.
Yeah. That is very important because is one of the things we'll approach with you in the interview. But first, some days ago, I entered the LinkedIn, and I saw one conversation you had with João Pedro de Magalhães, a scientist.
Oh, you're talking about my recent comment.
Yes, your recent comment, and because he published a post about companies in the rejuvenation space, and in your comment, one of the things you said is that you already succeeded, and I would like to explore a bit what you meant by succeeded.
Well, we were having trouble in the United States making E5. So it forced me to go to India. This is something I prefer not to do because it's totally painful for me to spend 21 hours in a plane. But it was worth it. What I found out just by coincidence, I mean, we've done all these studies on rats. We've shown, and Steve Horvath has shown, that we've lowered the DNA methylation age by 54% on male rats. So I could easily say at this point that we've shown, we've shown a couple of things. One thing, which is a big contention in this field, and the convoys are trying their best to prove me wrong, is that aging results from the accumulation of pro-aging factors. I say there are anti-aging factors in young blood that produce the changes. That is not believed, but in our rat studies, they say the reason that transferring young blood into old animals helps is because you're diluting the old aging factors. But in our treatment, the entire treatment puts in about 1/10 of their blood volume over a week, which probably means there's no change in their blood volume at all by the end of the day and by the end of the week for sure. But so that alone is interesting evidence. But then I did something else. And I don't know how well you can see my hands here. Probably not so very well because this is a lousy camera.
The hand you use at the 5 is the right hand, right? Is this hand, and
correct. So just for the heck of it, we had some old lyophilized E5, which I just mixed with a little saline buffer. And it was in a little jar, say a yay large, and I had a glove on. I put my glove finger into the jar. Most of it was undissolved at the bottom. And then I just rubbed it on my hand, period. Next day, nothing happened. I forgot about it. The next day, nothing happened. I forgot about it. The third day, I woke up and I saw what was literally a miracle on my own hands. I saw that my skin was thicker, my color was more even, my veins were not prominent, the scars underlying my skin were now invisible again like I was when I was a young man. So not only do I know, and Kavita, who was our principal investigator at IMS, said it's hard to believe that those two hands could belong to the same person. It's been 3 months now. It seems to me absolute proof that it cannot be a question of delusion, that there has to be youthful factors that actually rejuvenate tissues. And it works on human beings.
Yeah, so a lot of the tests you have done already at UVM were with rats. So this is the first time E5 was somehow trialed in humans. And one question that we have is, do you have plans to test in other animals, both human and non-human? And if there are going to be like human trials, do you know like when? Do you expect to have human trials with E5?
As soon as we can get enough E5, we're going to start off with cat trials, particularly cats die of renal disease, which is not uncommon in human beings either in old age. And we want to see if we can cure that because, as you know, there's no specific NIH designation for aging as a disease. So you have to find diseases of aging that E5 will work on. So, of course, we're looking at the what is it? What do they say? Low hanging fruit to begin with. For instance, we know that E5 within a matter of a week, 2 weeks, brings grip strength back to youthful levels in old rats. Grip strength is they have to grab onto something and hold on with all their might. And so frailty, sarcopenia, is one of the first low-hanging fruits that we've already demonstrated that we can have a market effect on, at least in rats. So now it comes to other animals, as you say, non-human primates at some point, and human beings. And I tell you the truth, I personally would inject it now if I had enough.
Oh, I see.
You know, Harold, um, uh, regarding the theory, the general theory about E5, in Josh Mitteldorf's blog, I read that you took some conclusions from your test in the hand regarding that E5 act locally and not necessarily systemically.
Yes,
So I would like
that's a very good point.
yeah, I would like you to explore a bit what that means. I mean, that means that if I don't work acting in a central clock in the brain, for example, and then to the rest of the body, or that means that there is no such central clock, and that if I works on the general population of cells that make a self regulation of aging. I mean, what you can say about aging itself from your experiment in which you use it.
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, what you said is one likely or possible explanation, but we really don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. I know that the E5 is apparently potentially able by itself to rejuvenate cells, which means that we could probably develop a cell culture assay for it, which would certainly be a lot quicker than rats, kinder. Um, uh, yeah, this was a big surprise to me. First of all, I never expected it to work. It was just I'm just sitting around the lab with a bunch of guys and girls mostly, women, pardon me, and we're just talking and etc. And science often grows out of accidents and just random occurrences, and I've had a few that I've outlined in the book, and there are some more that I'll outline if we ever get another book published, because I think people would like to know about E5, and I would certainly like to know a lot more about aging. You know, I'd always considered myself a biological engineer. I wanted to do things. I wasn't so much a scientist wanting to learn as an engineer wanting to do. Now I'm really interested in aging as a scientist. Now it's like all consuming, and there are so many mysteries. So we hope to solve them. I hope to live long enough to do so, but even if I don't, it's been worth it.
So you said you had to travel to India, and as far as we know, you went there to see how the trial with old female rats, it's a lifespan trial, was doing,
Correct.
right? And one thing that
Correct.
apparently one of the results that you had is that this lifespan trial with older females showed that E5 possibly isn't as effective in females as it is in males. So, do you have a hypothesis about that, or do you think there will be necessary a female specific E5?
Well, all right. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your question. If you said that E5 is not as effective in females as it is in males, that's correct.
And do you know
Okay.
why?
Do I have any ideas of why?
Yeah.
Yes, I have some very definite ideas of why. I think in females, first of all, there's been some articles published recently showing that there's different transcription in females and males of various factors. But I think in females, the ovary is a very important part of the aging process. And I have some ideas of how to counteract that. For instance, you know, if you take an old rat and you take the ovary of an old infertile rat, female, and you take the ovary of a young fertile female rat and place it within the envelope of the ovary, that the rat will live 30% longer.
Wow.
And if you actually remove the follicles, the egg cells, from that tissue young tissue transplanted into the old rat lives 40% longer. So, and that's all, you know, that's with an ovary that's already beginning to age.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'm thinking about various aspects of that, and of course, there's always a possibility that treatment prior to menopause might prevent it. We don't know. That's one of our major challenges. And to me, it's very, 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 very important. I'd rather see my wife healthy than myself.
Yes, well, regarding the patent is out. I mean, it was, of course,
Yes.
something that many people were expecting, you know, and I'm sure that it was maybe a surprise for some people. Maybe for other people, it wasn't a surprise, but based on what you saw in the included in the for what people told you about the patent, your discussions, what do you think about this process of publishing the patent? What do you expect from them? What evaluation you do about it?
Well, I've heard a lot of complaints. Complaints being that the patent is so complex, nobody can figure out what the heck is happening. And that's, of course, the job of lawyers. So I didn't write the patent. The lawyers wrote it, and I can't help what they wrote.
So you were saying that you had a lot of complaints. You were saying that you had a lot of complaints.
Well, mainly from Josh. I can't say a lot of complaints.
But
Josh is important to us, and we regard him as a friend and a wise person. So of course his opinion matters to us. But yeah, it's not at all obvious. I think I haven't thoroughly read the patent myself, and that's what I intend to do sometime very soon. I think what was surprising is that we found that you could use almost any mammalian source for E5. And there's no reaction. There's no negative reaction. There's no allergic reaction. There's honestly no reaction at all, except the rats kind of startle when you stick a needle into them. but I would too. And when I put it on my hand, nothing whatsoever, except that it suddenly became like 20, 30 years younger. So at this point, I know it'll work on human beings. So when you ask me, how do I know that I've discovered it? Well, it may not work on all human beings, but it is at least the beginning. And even the female rats that didn't live much longer than the untreated rats, when you looked at them, they still had glossy fur and their skin was in good shape and they seemed active. So I imagine this will be an entire facelift in a jar that actually restores your skin to its youthful condition. Now that can't be bad. That has kind of changed our immediate goals, because selling that, we're sure it'll have a huge market, and we can use that money to make sure that our stuff is injectable, which is our ultimate aim. We're not interested in cosmetics, except as two things. One, to introduce the world to the fact that rejuvenation is not a dream. It's an actuality. It exists, and you can see it on your own skin. When I saw it, I kept on looking back and forth, because I couldn't believe it. It's as though your body can just change it at will if you know the right way. So, if I say that I believe we've already achieved rejuvenation, I believe that's to be the truth, at least partially. Complete rejuvenation, we'll certainly be working on it. That's our goal, and that's what we believe we can do already. After that, well, who knows?
So you said that E5 could possibly be a super cosmetic, right?
Could be.
Do you have an idea? Because you also mentioned that
I would imagine it would be.
Yeah, you also mentioned that you guys have the intention of launching it as a cosmetic, as a product for the skin. Do you have any idea when this could be commercially available? How long it takes for it to reach the market?
Yeah, personally, I don't. We're going to certainly have to do human trials. There's no question about that. We're setting up for that. So that's not the problem. And of course, the Federal Drug Administration is not so stringent about stuff that you apply to your skin as stuff that you inject into your body. So I'm hoping it'll be within the next 2 years, maybe within the next year, if we're lucky.
Great.
So we're trying our hardest.
Harold, before the patent is out, there was a question regarding the fact that without the patent published, it was more difficult to publish a paper in a relevant scientific journal, because it wasn't like a reproducible article or a reproducible experiment. But now that the patent is out, do you think it would be possible to publish it? For example, that article that you and Steve Horvath and Rodolfo Goya published on bioRxiv 2 years ago. Do you think with the patent out, easier to publish that article in a relevant journal?
Yes, yes, yes. It's easier. Should be easier. I think. You know, you never know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, because in that case, it can be in certain ways understood. The
reproduced.
Yeah, reproduced, of course. So, do you have like
If it can't be reproduced, it isn't science.
Exactly. Another question is that you mentioned it a bit earlier that you had a bit of a hard time in the USA producing E5 and you had to go back to India. So right now, Yuvan, your company is, as far as we know, has a lab in the USA and a lab in India. Do you guys intend to continue with that model?
Correct.
Or do you want to move operations to a single country?
We're not sure of that yet.
Okay, because as you said, India has some advantages related to the US.
Oh yeah. For instance, an H-Strat costs us $40 in India. It costs us $400 in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, for an H-Strat. Go to Mumbai, you can find all the H-Strats you want on the street. but of course, these are sprigged, all the purebreds.
Harold, a bit about these three versions in Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. I mean, we know that your parents were Polish, right?
No. My father was born in the U.S. My mom was born in Lubavna, Poland.
Okay. Your mom lived there, and she mentioned her previous life there because my grandfather was from Poland, and he used to talk a lot about his life there. And my grandmother was also from Poland. So, do you have like family stories about their life there?
Well, they were very poor. And the only family story I remember is that the whole family slept in the kitchen with the cow, all around the cow to keep themselves warm. that's the only story I want to tell anyway.
Okay.
And regarding the, for example, the United States is very close to several Spanish-speaking countries, like in Central America and South America, or even Spain, Portugal, Brazil. Have you ever been in Spanish or Portuguese speaking country in your life?
Yeah, Mexico.
Ah.
I was in Mexico for several months. My Spanish isn't good. I can understand a bit. I never took it in school, so I had a bunch of Puerto Rican friends. So I learned some Puerto Rican Spanish, and I could communicate in Mexico, at least the basic necessities. By the way, I love Mexico. Anyway,
Why have you been a month there? You were you researching there in Mexico?
just vacation.
Okay.
Just vacation.
Yes, yes, of course. So the trials with E5, um, topical E5. There is some expectations about them because, as you told us, it can be an introduction of E5 to society regarding results. So
Correct. People actually see the results. There won't be any doubt in anybody's mind.
can you show again your right hand? Yes,
Yes.
better.
Right
It's
hand.
better.
Oh,
Left
yeah.
hand.
Okay, again. Can you make it again? Okay, okay. So one thing, yeah. So one thing important is that maybe E5 can be commercialized in the topical form without have to go in for the same process in FDA.
Yeah, well, that's what we're hoping.
Because there is a matter that if I goes to the bloodstream, it needs to be tested like a medicine.
That's correct. But just the fact that it only worked locally is a good indication that it doesn't travel through the bloodstream when applied topically. Now, we intended to apply it into the bloodstream directly. That's a different story. That'll require much more, but I think I'm hoping that there'll be a popular outcry for us to get this done as quickly as possible. That's my hope,
And
and it should be true because anything else is crazy.
you only use it once in your hand, right? So the results, you can
Once.
still see the results, or the hand has aged a bit.
Yes, you can still see the results, but the hand has aged a bit. But let me tell you, you see that horrible looking thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a result of just hitting my hand against the door
Mm-hmm.
because my skin has become so thin that it's so easy to break. On this hand, you don't see that
Yeah.
because the skin's become thicker, and I don't have to worry about it.
regarding the new study with females and males, you will apply a 5 each 45 days. So supposedly you already applied the second dose of E5 in the new study. And do you have results after the second dose?
Yeah, no, I may have seen it. It seems to me that again, you could see a definite difference between males and females, but it was not as marked as it was before. And age may be a factor in this because the old females were 6 months older than the present females and the original females and males that we used in the study. So we're going back to our 18-month-old, which is late middle age, early old age, and try the whole experiment over again. This time do it correctly.
But Harold, an important question for me is that we see this difference between males and females, and some of us, in fact, almost everybody of us, can be worried that E5 could work, for example, in our fathers or grandfathers, and work far less in our mothers and grandmothers. So, regarding this difference between males and females, I think even if it functioned worse in females, but if it can work significantly, at least, it will be important for our mothers and grandmothers, So my question is, this
Oh,
difference,
yes.
this difference between males and female, is big enough to make E5 uh, don't work in females, or it will work just
No,
less.
less well.
But it,
And it seems to keep the external appearance of the female. You know, if you compared our treated rats to our untreated females, uh, you'd see that the untreated rats had much sparser fur, kind of bedraggled, and it looked like they had rashes on their skin, etc. The treated females had silky, thick fur, and their skin was fine, and they looked okay. You know, my that of course, females is my biggest concern at the moment. I mean, real concern. I mean, it's a lot of concerns, of course, getting E5 into a topical application, etc. But not Josh, Steve Horvath recently showed that the genes that control maximum lifespan are unrelated to the genes that control aging. So what that means, I have no idea, nor does anybody else. I'm, you know, then what's the function of aging if it's not to control lifespan? I mean, you can come up with evolutionary reasons why an old male who's particularly vital would continue to have children that would improve the breeding stock, etc. But we don't know about this. The one thing I can tell you is that the experiments of Kai in Albert Einstein in New York show that he could increase lifespan by 30% just by injecting exosomes from neural stem cells into the brains, into the third ventricles, where the hypothalamus is, of mice or rats. So, and that's with a single injection. I think I know how to proceed in that direction. This will take a little time, but somebody once said, if what you're doing to you seems the most important thing in the world, why would you do anything else? To me, this seems the most important thing in the world, and there's nothing else I will do.
And one thing regarding
My
this,
life is devoted to this.
yeah. One thing regarding this study with males and females with E5, do you intend to let the rats live and die naturally like you were doing in the lifespan study? Or do you intend to stop the study before that?
We were intending to stop the study before that, but I may put in a request that we don't, or keep at least most of the rats alive. We haven't talked about this.
and Harold, you showed in the patent a very, very important thing that you used pig's blood to rejuvenate
Yeah,
rats.
and humans, me. But we're looking for other sources, and we're trying other slightly different purification methods for those sources. We need to. I mean, ultimately, The best thing would be, for instance, if we could just withdraw blood from cattle without killing them.
Yeah, because even if uh, animals were used, it would be a bit problematic because as everybody or almost everybody would want E5, of course, we know that animals are.
Well, listen. Pigs are raised for one reason. They're raised to be butchered. And their blood is a byproduct, usually used for fertilizer, at a couple of cents per pound.
We're just asking because like some people may be vegetarian, things like that. Like if you're thinking about an alternative.
I mean, I can't help it. At some point in the future, we're going to find out what E5 is exactly. And hopefully, if it's not too complex, and from what we've seen in EM photographs, it's very complex. If it's not too complex, we can synthesize it. If not, well, you'll have to deal with your own ethics. But it's honestly, it's no different than eating a ham sandwich.
Yeah. So I think now we already asked everything we wanted to ask you, Harold. Thank you for your time for this interview. Just to remind.
Thank you.
And just to remind everyone, Harold wrote a book called The Illusion of Knowledge, and this book is already available in English, and now it will also be available in Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. So thank you, Harold. Do you want to say anything?
Yes, well, of course, I make Nina's words my words. So thank you, Harold, and we will be waiting for rejuvenate our family and ourselves and our loving ones. That's what everyone wants.